By sunrise, one of us will be ruined, Duke William Ashford said, and the great clock above the fireplace answered with a single merciless chime. Midnight had settled over Ashford Hall like black velvet, swallowing the last warmth from the windows and turning every portrait in the library into a silent witness. William stood behind his father's mahogany desk, one hand pressed against a letter bearing the seal of the county court, the other closed around an old silver pocket watch. 12 hours. That was all the law had left him. If he remained unmarried when the courthouse opened at noon, the northern estates would pass into the control of his cousin, Charles Ashford, along with 3 villages, 40 tenant farms, and the stone cottages where generations of families had lived beneath the protection of the Ashford name. The solicitor cleared his throat but offered no comfort. The steward stared at the carpet. Near the far bookcase, Clara Bennet continued sorting ledgers as though powerful men did not decide the fate of entire households around her. William's gray eyes moved from the legal notice to the rain trembling against the tall windows. "I need a wife by tomorrow," he declared. The room became so still that even the fire seemed to shrink. His steward looked up in alarm. The solicitor began listing impossible names: daughters of distant earls, widowed ladies in Boston, respectable women in New York who could not possibly arrive before morning. William heard none of them. Every suggestion required time, permission, travel, or affection. He possessed none of those luxuries. Then a quiet voice crossed the room. "Then promise me 3 things." Clara closed the ledger and rose. She wore a plain brown dress, carefully mended at one cuff, and her chestnut hair was pinned without ornament. Nothing about her belonged in a ducal marriage proposal, yet nothing in her expression asked permission to speak. William studied her as if seeing her for the first time. For 4 years she had managed correspondence, corrected estate accounts, and remembered every tenant's name. She had never flattered him. She had never feared him. "You understand what I said?" he asked. "Perfectly. I require a lawful wife before noon. And I require 3 promises before I become one." The solicitor shifted uneasily. The steward's breath caught. William stepped around the desk, each footfall measured against the dark wood floor. Most women would ask what title they would receive. Clara met his gaze. A title cannot warm an empty cottage. Or what allowance would be theirs? Money cannot make an unwilling woman free. Something tightened in his face, though his voice remained cold. "You speak boldly for someone with no family name to protect. That is why I know the value of protection, Your Grace." Lightning whitened the windows. For one instant, the library stood revealed in silver and shadow, the Duke with his sealed inheritance, the young woman with nothing but composure, and the distance between them no greater than 6 feet and an entire world. William opened the pocket watch. The second hand moved without pity. "Name your price." Clara's expression did not change. "They are not prices." "What are they?" She placed one hand upon the closed ledger, where the names of 40 families waited beneath her fingers. "Proof that I am marrying a man of honor, not merely saving a duke from losing what he owns." William looked at her for a long moment. No one in Ashford Hall dared speak to him that way. No one except the woman he might have to marry before the next sunset. "Very well," he said. "Tell me the first promise." Clara did not look at the Duke when she opened the ledger. Her fingers moved calmly across the page, stopping beside a column of names written in her neat hand. "The first promise concerns the northern tenants," she said. William's expression hardened. "What of them?" "Your cousin has already prepared notices of removal." The solicitor lifted his head. The steward turned sharply toward her. Clara continued before either man could interrupt. 40 families. Most have lived on Ashford land for more than 20 years. Some for 3 generations. The notices are dated for the morning after he receives control of the estates. William crossed the room and took the ledger from her. Candlelight moved across the sharp planes of his face as he examined the entries. Rent totals. Harvest reports. Repairs delayed. Payments collected twice under different headings. His jaw tightened. "Where did you find this?" "In the duplicate accounts from the Northern office. Those records were destroyed in the flood last spring." The original records were destroyed. The clerk kept copies. William looked up. "And gave them to you?" "He gave them to no one. He left them inside a false bottom in his desk before he resigned." The fire snapped softly behind them. Outside, rain dragged its fingers down the glass. William turned several pages. each one revealing another quiet theft hidden beneath respectable language. Why did you not bring this to me sooner? Clara's gaze did not waver. I tried. The answer landed more heavily than accusation. William remembered sealed memoranda placed among his correspondence. He remembered Charles dismissing them as clerical confusion. He remembered choosing speed over attention. When, he asked? 3 months ago. Then again 6 weeks ago. The steward lowered his eyes. William closed the ledger. You believe Charles intends to empty the cottages and sell the land. He intends to sell the timber first. Then the farms. The families are an inconvenience. And your first condition? Clara drew a folded paper from beneath the ledger. Every tenant presently in good standing must receive a permanent lease at the current rate. No removal without review by an independent magistrate. No increase in rent for 5 years. The solicitor nearly coughed. Miss Bennet, that is an extraordinary demand. So is marriage before noon. William's eyes remained fixed on her. There was no triumph in her face. No fear either. Only resolve. He unfolded the paper and read every line. You drafted this yourself. Yes. You understand that it limits the authority of the estate. It limits cruelty disguised as authority. The steward shifted uneasily, but William raised one hand, silencing him. He moved toward the window, the document held behind his back. For years, men had approached him with requests wrapped in flattery. Clara asked for nothing for herself. Not money, not jewels, not even security. Her first demand was shelter for people who could offer her no advantage. Suppose I refuse, he said. Then you will find another wife. There is no time. Then perhaps that is the first truth you must face tonight. William turned. The distance between them was 6 feet, but the room felt divided by something older than rank. Pride on one side, conscience on the other. He returned to the desk, took up the pen, and signed the paper. The scratch of the nib sounded louder than the storm. The leases will be sealed before the wedding. Clara inclined her head. Then the first promise is made. William placed the pen down. And the second? For the first time, something quieter entered her expression. Not hesitation. Memory. She folded her hands before her and said, You will never mistake marriage for ownership. William did not reach for the pen. For the first time that night, the silence between them changed. It was no longer the silence of negotiation. It was the silence of a locked room whose door had just been named. Clara stood beside the desk with her hands folded, her face composed, though the candle nearest her trembled in a draught that slipped beneath the library door. Explain, William said. I have already done so. You have given me a warning, not a condition. Then write this clearly. Our marriage will give you my name beside yours, but it will not give you the right to command my affection, my confidence, or my presence in your private rooms. The solicitor stared fixedly at the floor. The steward turned toward the fire. William's eyes narrowed, not with anger alone, but with something closer to wounded pride. You believe I would force obedience from you? Clara held his gaze. I believe powerful men are often obeyed before they understand what they have asked. His fingers tightened around the edge of the desk. I am not Charles. No, that is why I am still standing here. The answer stopped him. Rain tapped steadily against the windows, softer now, as if the storm itself had drawn closer to listen. Clara took a clean sheet of paper and placed it before him. I will perform every public duty required of your wife. I will manage your household with care. I will stand beside you when honor demands it. But whatever grows between us must be freely given. William looked down at the empty page. And if nothing grows? Then we will remain two honest strangers beneath the same roof. A shadow passed across his face. She did not know that honesty had been the one thing his first marriage had lacked, not because his late wife had deceived him, but because he had never asked what her silence concealed. He had mistaken endurance for peace. He had mistaken courtesy for contentment. By the time he understood the difference, the distance between them had become permanent. Clara watched him without curiosity, and that restraint unsettled him more than questions would have. You have considered this carefully, he said. A woman without fortune must consider everything carefully. You speak as though this bargain places you in danger. All bargains place the weaker person in danger. The words were quiet. They carried no accusation, yet William felt them strike against every privilege he had never needed to examine. He took up the pen. You will have separate rooms. Clara said nothing. No private expectation will be imposed upon you. Still she waited. His voice lowered. And no affection will be demanded that you do not choose to give. Only then did she nod. William wrote the condition in his own hand. The nib moved slowly this time, each line more deliberate than the last. When he finished, he signed beneath it and turned the page toward her. Clara read every word. Her shoulders eased by a fraction, so slight that no one else would have noticed. William did. "The second promise is made," she said. "You do not trust easily, Miss Bennet. Trust should not be easy, Your Grace." He leaned back, studying her across the candlelit desk. "Then what is the third promise?" Clara looked toward the dark portrait above the fireplace, the one draped in black cloth since the death of the Duchess. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, but far more dangerous. "When they shame me, you will not remain silent." William's gaze followed Clara's toward the veiled portrait above the fireplace. Beneath the black cloth rested the painted face of Eleanor Ashford, the woman he had married 12 years earlier and failed in ways no legal document could name. The room seemed colder at once. "Why would they shame you?" he asked. Clara turned back to him. "Because society forgives a duke for marrying beneath his rank more readily than it forgives the woman who accepts him." The solicitor shifted beside the desk. "Miss Bennet, no respectable person would dare insult the Duchess of Ashford." Clara looked at him with quiet sadness. "Respectable people often speak most cruelly when they believe cruelty protects tradition." William said nothing. He remembered Eleanor standing alone at a winter reception while his mother questioned her breeding before 50 guests. He had heard every word. He had remained beside the window, telling himself that silence would prevent a scene. Eleanor had smiled through dinner. She had never mentioned it afterward. That memory had followed him longer than any accusation. "What truth would you require me to speak?" he asked. "Whatever truth the moment demands." That is dangerously broad. So is silence. The old clock marked another minute. William lowered his eyes to the blank page. His hand rested near the pen, yet he could not take it. Clara saw the hesitation and understood that the third promise had found the wound he kept hidden even from himself. "You may refuse," she said, "and leave 40 families to Charles. The choice belongs to you." William looked at her sharply. She offered no comfort, no persuasion, no attempt to rescue him from the weight of his own decision. At last he sat, drew the paper closer, and wrote that he would publicly defend her name whenever it was challenged, regardless of inconvenience to his title or reputation. His signature followed, dark and final. Clara read the words, then signed beneath them. "The third promise is made." William closed the documents and pressed his seal into warm red wax. "Wake the chaplain," he told the steward. "The ceremony will take place at dawn." 3 hours later, the rain had faded to silver mist. The chapel stood at the eastern edge of Ashford Hall, small and cold, with narrow windows that admitted the first pale light of morning. Clara wore a simple ivory dress borrowed from the housekeeper's daughter. No jewels adorned her throat. No flowers softened her hands. William stood before the altar in a black mourning coat, his face composed, though the silver watch in his palm had grown warm from his grip. The leases had already been sealed. The 3 promises rested inside the solicitor's case. Their marriage began not with music, but with the turning of a key in the chapel door. The chaplain spoke the vows. William answered clearly. Clara's voice did not tremble. When he placed the ring upon her finger, he paused only once, as though recognizing the difference between possession and trust. Then the doors opened. Charles Ashford entered with frost upon his coat and satisfaction in his eyes. Beside him stood an elderly man clutching a leather Bible. "Before this ceremony is recorded," Charles said, "you should know that Miss Bennet may not be free to marry at all." Clara went still. William stepped between her and the doorway. Charles smiled. "Reverend Hale witnessed her engagement 6 years ago, and he has brought proof." Clara's face lost none of its composure, but the hand beneath her sleeve tightened around the edge of the prayer book. Reverend Hale stepped forward, his white hair damp from the morning mist, and opened the leather Bible to a folded document marked with an old parish seal. Charles watched William with the patient confidence of a man who believed the outcome already belonged to him. 6 years ago, the Reverend began, Miss Clara Bennet entered into a formal engagement with Mr. Thomas Reed of Hertford County. The chapel seemed to contract around the words. William did not move from Clara's side. An engagement is not a marriage, he said. No, Charles replied. But an undisclosed promise may establish deception, especially when a woman enters another union for advantage. Clara turned toward the Reverend. Read the entire record. Reverend Hale hesitated. Charles's smile thinned. The relevant portion has been presented. Then present all of it, Clara said. Her voice remained quiet, yet every person in the chapel heard the command within it. The Reverend lowered his eyes and continued. The engagement had been announced. A wedding date had been chosen. Then Thomas Reed had disappeared 3 days before the ceremony, leaving behind unpaid obligations and a letter releasing Clara from every promise. The release was signed, witnessed, and entered into the parish register. The chaplain beside the altar exhaled slowly. William's gaze moved to Charles. You knew this? Charles adjusted one glove. I knew there had been an attachment. You brought a witness before dawn and omitted the document that ended it. I brought a question of legitimacy. You brought an accusation. Clara looked at William then, and he understood with painful clarity that the third promise had not waited even an hour to test him. The chapel doors stood open behind Charles. Servants had gathered in the corridor. The solicitor watched in silence. One careless sentence from William could preserve appearances while leaving Clara alone beneath suspicion. He had made that choice once before. He would not make it again. Let every person here understand the truth, William said. His voice carried beyond the altar and into the stone passageway. Miss Bennet concealed nothing. Her former engagement ended lawfully 6 years ago. She entered this marriage at my request, under conditions I accepted freely. Any suggestion that she deceived me is false. Charles's expression hardened. You would stake the Ashford name upon the word of a clerk. William turned fully toward him. I would stake it upon evidence. A discipline you appear to find inconvenient. The solicitor stepped forward and examined the release. The document is valid. There is no legal obstacle to the marriage. Reverend Hale closed the Bible. Shame colored his weathered face. I should have spoken sooner. Clara's eyes softened, though her voice did not. Yes, you should have. The chaplain completed the register. William signed first. Clara signed beneath him, the new name unfamiliar in her hand. When they left the chapel, the household bowed, but whispers followed them through the eastern hall. By noon, the county would know that Duke William Ashford had married his former secretary. By evening, society would have rewritten necessity as scandal. Clara entered the great drawing room wearing the same simple ivory dress, now addressed as Duchess by servants who could not hide their surprise. William ordered breakfast, legal copies of the tenant leases, and a carriage for Reverend Hale. Their first meal as husband and wife was served beneath a crystal chandelier in a room large enough for 50 guests. They sat 12 feet apart. Silver covers gleamed between them. You kept the third promise, Clara said. William looked at the untouched coffee before him. I spoke the truth. Those are not always the same thing. He raised his eyes. They should be. For one brief moment, the cold formality between them eased. Then the butler entered carrying a cream envelope. A message for her grace. Clara opened it. Inside was an invitation to Lady Whitmore's winter reception that evening, with one sentence written beneath the formal script. Let us see whether a clerk can learn to wear a coronet before supper. William read the insult twice, then folded the invitation with such precision that the paper seemed to surrender beneath his fingers. You will not attend, he said. Clara lifted her eyes from the card. Was that a request? The question halted him. Only hours earlier, he had promised not to mistake marriage for ownership, and already habit had placed command upon his tongue. No, he said after a moment. It was concern poorly expressed. Then express it again. William set the invitation beside her untouched plate. Lady Whitmore has built her reputation upon discovering weakness in others. She will not welcome you. She will examine you. Clara poured coffee as calmly as if they were discussing the weather. Then she should not be disappointed. By 7 that evening, Ashford Hall stood beneath a clear winter sky, every roofline silvered with frost. Clara descended the staircase in a dark green gown borrowed from the late Duchess's and used wardrobe and altered by the housekeeper before sunset. The silk was modest, the sleeves long, the only ornament a narrow strand of pearls William had sent to her room. She had returned them. At the foot of the stairs, he waited in black evening clothes, one hand resting near his silver watch. His gaze paused upon her, not because the gown transformed her, but because it did not. She remained Clara, composed and unadorned by ambition. The pearls were part of the Ashford collection, he said. So is the silver in the dining room. I do not need to wear that either. Something nearly resembling amusement touched his face. You intend to make this difficult. I intend to remain recognizable to myself. The reception was held 5 miles away in a mansion blazing with candlelight. Conversation softened when William entered with Clara upon his arm. The silence lasted only seconds, but it carried the weight of judgment. Lady Whitmore approached in pale blue satin, her smile flawless and cold. "Your Grace," she said to William, then allowed her gaze to settle upon Clara. "How extraordinary. Yesterday you managed his correspondence. Tonight you carry his name." Clara inclined her head. Circumstances often reveal how quickly duties can change. "And manners?" Lady Whitmore asked. "Those usually reveal who has possessed them all along." A nearby gentleman concealed a smile behind his glass. William felt Clara's hand rest more lightly upon his sleeve, though her posture never shifted. He should have spoken. The third promise demanded it. Yet he hesitated, measuring scandal, consequence, and the attention of the room. Clara noticed. Of course she noticed. Before he could answer, Lady Whitmore turned toward the assembled guests. "We must be generous. A woman cannot be expected to understand a coronet before supper." Soft laughter moved through the room. William's silence lasted 3 heartbeats. It was enough. Clara withdrew her hand from his arm. "The coronet is not the difficult part," she said. "The difficult part is learning how many people confuse inherited rank with earned dignity." The laughter vanished. William finally stepped beside her. "My wife requires no instruction from anyone who mistakes humiliation for hospitality." Lady Whitmore's smile faltered. Clara looked at him, but no gratitude softened her expression. He had defended her. He had also waited. Later, beneath the glass roof of the conservatory, snow began to drift against the dark panes. William found Clara alone among sleeping roses. "I spoke," he said, "after the room had already wounded me. I was choosing the proper words. Silence always sounds proper to the person protected by it." He had no answer. Then his gaze fell upon the folded letter in her hand, its paper yellow with age, its seal broken. Across the front, in a delicate script he recognized at once, was his name. Eleanor's handwriting. His late wife's final letter. William did not touch the letter. For several seconds, he only stared at Eleanor's handwriting, as though the dead had reached across years to place a hand upon his shoulder. Clara stood beneath the glass roof while snow whispered against the panes above them. "Where did you find it?" he asked. "Inside the false bottom of the northern office desk." "With the copied accounts?" "Yes." His face changed. Not visibly enough for the guests beyond the conservatory to notice, but Clara saw the color leave it. "She wrote to me before she died. She wrote to you many times." William's gaze lifted sharply. Clara unfolded the letter with care. "This one concerns Charles." The roses around them had gone dormant for winter, their bare stems casting thin shadows over the tiled floor. Clara began to read, not with drama, but with the steady mercy of someone delivering truth without cruelty. Eleanor had discovered irregular payments from the northern estates. She had traced them to Charles through altered rent books and false maintenance charges. She had asked William to investigate. She had begged him not to dismiss her concerns simply because Charles belonged to the family and she did not. William closed his eyes. "I remember." His voice was barely audible. "She spoke of missing funds at dinner. My mother called it an embarrassing misunderstanding." "And you?" Clara asked. He looked through the dark glass toward the lights of the reception. "I told Eleanor we would discuss it privately." "Did you?" "No." The answer seemed to age him. He took the letter at last, his fingers careful around the fragile paper. There was always another meeting. Another estate problem. Another reason to postpone discomfort. Clara said nothing. Her silence was not forgiveness, and it was not condemnation. It simply left him nowhere to hide. "She became ill that winter," he continued. "She withdrew from society. I told myself she preferred solitude. Perhaps she believed speaking changed nothing." William read the final lines. Eleanor had written that silence inside a marriage could become a locked room. She had written that Charles would continue because respectable men protected one another through hesitation. She had written that William's greatest fault was not cruelty, But delay. His hand lowered. You knew this before the ceremony. I knew there was a letter. I did not read it until this afternoon. Why carry it here? Clara's eyes moved toward the ballroom doors. Because Charles has already begun shaping the story of our marriage. I believe the truth might become necessary. As if summoned by his name, Charles appeared beyond the glass, speaking quietly with Lady Whitmore. When he noticed the letter in William's hand, his expression changed for one brief instant. Alarm. Then he smiled and entered the conservatory. A private family document, he said lightly. How curious that it should find its way into the hands of a former clerk. William folded the letter. You knew Eleanor had discovered the accounts. Charles shrugged. Eleanor was unwell. She imagined conspiracies. The copied ledgers confirm every figure. The smile vanished. Copied ledgers can be manufactured. Clara watched him carefully. So can invitations. So can rumors. So can incomplete records brought before a chapel at dawn. Charles stepped closer, his voice low. You have mistaken a borrowed title for protection. William moved beside Clara before she could answer. This time there was no hesitation. She has not borrowed anything. Guests had begun gathering near the conservatory entrance, drawn by the tension. Lady Whitmore stood among them, listening. Charles saw the audience and changed tactics. Then perhaps everyone should know the terms under which this remarkable marriage occurred. From inside his coat, he produced several folded pages bearing William's seal. Clara's face stilled. The three promises, or something made to resemble them. Charles raised the papers so the room could see. A marriage purchased through threats, conditions, and private secrets, he announced. Tell us, cousin, did your new Duchess save the estate, or did she blackmail you into giving her a coronet? The room became so quiet that the faint hiss of the conservatory lamps sounded like rain. Charles held the altered papers between two fingers, displaying William's seal as though it were proof enough to turn suspicion into truth. Lady Whitmore's guests gathered beyond the glass doors, their faces bright with curiosity and hidden satisfaction. Clara did not reach for the documents. She looked at William. That was all. He understood the question in her silence. Would he speak at once, or would he again search for the safest moment to be honorable? Charles smiled. The first condition grants her control over tenant contracts. The second protects her from every obligation of marriage. The third requires the Duke to defend her regardless of the truth. A clever arrangement for a woman who entered this house with nothing. Murmurs moved through the crowd. William took one step forward. You have changed the wording. Have I? Charles asked. The seal is yours. A seal proves wax was pressed. It does not prove when, where, or upon what. Charles's expression tightened. William turned to the solicitor, who had followed them from Ashford Hall after receiving an urgent message. The older man stepped from the doorway carrying a leather case. The original agreement remains in my custody, he said. Each page is numbered, witnessed, and marked with a private notation known only to His Grace and myself. He opened the case and placed the true documents upon a marble table. The difference was immediate. Charles's pages contained added phrases, missing lines, and a false clause assigning Clara a generous annual income. The original granted her no money at all. Lady Whitmore lowered her fan. Then why demand conditions? She asked. Clara answered before William could. Because a title without dignity is only a decorated prison. Charles gave a cold laugh. Fine words from a clerk who planned this carefully. William moved beside her. Not before her. Beside her. She planned to protect 40 families from your greed. His voice carried through the conservatory. She required freedom because she understood power better than I did. And she demanded that I speak when others tried to shame her because my silence once failed another woman under this roof. A visible shock passed through the guests. William drew Eleanor's letter from his coat. My late wife discovered the thefts 6 years ago. I dismissed her warning. Charles continued because I found delay more comfortable than truth. Charles's face lost its practiced calm. You would disgrace Eleanor's memory before strangers? No. I disgrace myself by admitting how poorly I honored it. He handed the letter and the copied ledgers to the solicitor. Every account will be examined by the county court. Every stolen payment will be restored. Until then, Charles Ashford is forbidden from acting in any capacity for this estate. Charles looked around the room, but no one stepped toward him. Influence had deserted him as swiftly as admiration had once gathered. He folded the false papers with unsteady hands. You are choosing ruin for a woman you married this morning. William's gaze did not leave Clara. I am choosing truth. Ruin is what silence built. The guests parted when Charles walked away. No one spoke until the outer doors closed. Then William faced the room. Clara Bennett did not blackmail me. I asked her to become my wife because I needed her courage before I understood its worth. Every condition she named was just. Every accusation against her is false. Anyone who repeats it will answer to me publicly. Clara's composure remained, but sorrow had entered her eyes. He had fulfilled the promise completely. He had also revealed that she had been right to demand it. The journey back to Ashford Hall passed beneath a sky heavy with snow. Neither spoke. At the entrance, William offered his hand. Clara stepped down without taking it. In the great hall, she removed her wedding ring and placed it upon the table beside his silver watch. You defended me, she said. I should have done so sooner. Yes. Her voice was gentle, which made the distance in it more painful. I cannot remain merely because you finally became the man you promised to be. William looked at the ring between them. Where will you go? To the cottage my father left near the eastern village. Clara. She met his eyes. Do not use your title to stop me. Keep the second promise now. He stood motionless as she crossed the hall. At the staircase, she paused, but did not turn. The first promise saved the tenants. The third saved my name. The second will tell me whether any of them were ever real. Then she disappeared into the shadows above, leaving William alone with the ring, the watch, and the first honest consequence of his life. Clara left Ashford Hall at dawn beneath a sky washed pale with winter light. William did not command the carriage to stop. He did not send servants after her. He stood at the library window with the wedding ring in his palm and watched the road carry her toward the eastern village, understanding at last that restraint could be the most difficult form of love. The days that followed were quiet, but not empty. William summoned the county magistrate and placed every copied ledger before him. Charles was removed from all estate business. The stolen funds were traced, and the northern tenants received permanent leases bearing the Ashford seal. Each family was protected from sudden removal, and every rent remained fixed as Clara had required. William then instructed the solicitor to prepare a second document. It released Clara from every financial, social, and marital obligation she had not freely chosen. No property claim, no command to return, no penalty for leaving. When the solicitor asked whether William understood what he was surrendering, the Duke looked toward the veiled portrait above the fireplace. For once, he said, I understand what I am refusing to own. His final act was public. Before the county council, the church trustees, and every landholder who had repeated Charles's accusations, William read a statement restoring Clara's name. He credited her with preserving 40 homes, exposing years of dishonesty, and forcing the Ashford estate to remember that duty meant more than inheritance. He did not call her ungrateful. He did not ask for pity. He named his own failures without excuse. 3 weeks passed before he went to her. Snow lay 2 inches deep along the narrow road to the cottage, bright beneath a clear afternoon sun. William traveled without a carriage, walking the final mile alone. The house was small, built of gray stone, with smoke rising from the chimney and rosemary growing stubbornly beneath the kitchen window. Clara opened the door wearing a plain blue dress, her hair loosely pinned. She looked neither surprised nor pleased. Your Grace. William, he said, only if you choose. She studied him, then stepped onto the threshold but did not invite him inside. He held out a leather folder. The tenant leases. Your release. The public declaration. All completed. Clara accepted the folder and read the first page. You kept them. Too late to earn anything from you. Perhaps. The word was gentle, but guarded. William drew the silver pocket watch from his coat. Its chain had been repaired. I found this beside the ring. Clara looked at it, and something softened in her eyes. You dropped it when I left. I thought you had taken it. It was never mine. He closed his fingers around the watch. Neither were you. The winter air moved between them, carrying the scent of wood smoke and cold earth. William removed no ring from his pocket. He carried no flowers, no contract, and no promise written by a lawyer. I came to ask nothing you do not freely wish to give, he said. Clara's gaze remained steady. And what do you wish? The chance to become worthy of the truth you gave me. She looked past him toward the distant outline of Ashford Hall, barely visible beyond the white fields. A chance is not forgiveness. I know. And love is not gratitude. I know that too. For the first time, his answer contained no defense. Clara opened the folder again, then closed it carefully. The tenants sent me letters, she said. They told me what you changed. You changed it first. Silence settled, but it no longer felt like punishment. William waited without stepping closer. At last Clara reached for the pocket watch. She placed it back into his hand and folded his fingers over it. You once asked what my price was, she said. I remember. There was never a price. No. Her hand remained over his for one quiet moment. Only a choice. Then she opened the door wider. William did not move until she gave the smallest nod. He crossed the threshold without title, command, or certainty. The wedding ring remained at Ashford Hall. It would wait. Some promises protect a marriage, but the truest ones teach two wounded hearts that love begins only where possession ends.